in the heart of Chicago, nestled atop one of its tallest skyscrapers. The Kane penthouse towered over the city like a fortress. From its floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see the glittering skyline stretching all the way to Lake Michigan. It was a view meant to inspire awe and ambition. But within those pristine walls, the air often felt cold and unwelcoming. Alexander Kane stood in the hallway of his home, his dark suit pressed to perfection, his watch gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. Every move he made spoke of authority, control, and an unwavering determination to succeed. He had built his empire through sheer force of will, and everything in his life, from his business deals to his relationships, was managed with the same calculated precision. But as Alexander paused outside the living room, the sharp, crisp sound of laughter broke his stride. His daughter, Emma, was giggling, a rare and fleeting sound in their household. He stepped closer, drawn by the sound, and stopped in the doorway. Inside, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her chestnut hair spilling over her shoulders as she clutched her doll. Beside her, Sophia Carter knelt, her voice soft and warm as she hummed a tune while brushing Emma's hair. Sophia had a way of turning ordinary moments into something special, of making the massive penthouse feel just a little less hollow. But Alexander's expression hardened. To him, this wasn't the time for play or distractions. His voice, clipped and commanding, cut through the moment like a knife. "Sophia," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Do I pay you to sing nursery rhymes, or to ensure my daughter is disciplined?" Sophia's hands stilled as she glanced up, her cheeks flushing. "Mr. Kane," she began, keeping her voice calm. "Emma had a difficult morning. I thought a little music might help her unwind." Alexander's cold gaze shifted to Emma, who instinctively clutched her doll tighter. "What helps my daughter," he said, his voice like ice, "is structure and discipline, not meaningless distractions." Emma's small voice broke through the tension. "Daddy," she said, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. "Sophia makes me happy. She's the only one who does." For a fleeting moment, Alexander's expression softened. There was a flicker of something, perhaps guilt, perhaps regret, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks. "Sophia," he said, his tone dismissive, "see to it that the chores are done." Sophia rose to her feet, her back straight, but her heart heavy. "Of course, Mr. Kane," she replied, her voice steady despite the sting of his words. She gave him a small, reassuring smile before stepping out of the room. That evening, the penthouse transformed into a stage for one of Alexander's lavish business dinners. The dining room sparkled under the chandelier's glow, the table adorned with the finest crystal and silver. Alexander hosted with his usual charisma, his voice commanding attention as he spoke to his guests, an audience of high-profile clients and investors. Sophia hovered at the edge of the room, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Her role tonight wasn't to engage or be seen, but to make herself invisible, attending to every detail with quiet precision. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, and subtly directed the servers when needed. But when a young server tripped, sending a glass of red wine dangerously close to one of the guests, the silence in the room was shattered. Without hesitation, Sophia stepped forward, swiftly calming the situation. "I deeply apologize for the mishap," she said, her tone professional and composed. "I'll ensure everything is taken care of." Alexander's voice, sharp and cold, broke through the tension. "Perhaps if you spent less time indulging in personal matters and more time focused on your duties, these things wouldn't happen." Sophia froze, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, the awkwardness spreading across the room like a ripple. But she wasn't the type to shrink away from confrontation. "My job," she said evenly, meeting Alexander's gaze, "is to maintain order. That's exactly what I'm doing." The room grew still. Alexander's dark eyes narrowed, his authority challenged in front of his guests. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Don't ever contradict me in front of my clients again. Do you understand?" For a brief moment, Sophia considered walking away, leaving behind this world of rigid rules and unspoken expectations. But instead, she held his gaze, her voice calm but firm. I didn't contradict you, Mr. Kane. I resolved the issue. If you prefer a different approach in the future, I'll make adjustments. Alexander's jaw tightened. He didn't reply, but the tension in his posture spoke volumes. With a final glance at her, he turned back to his guests, his charm back in place as though nothing had happened. Hours later, after the guests had departed and the penthouse had returned to its usual quiet, Sophia sat in her small room tucked away in the corner of the estate. The walls were bare except for a single wooden box on her nightstand, a box she kept hidden from everyone. She opened it, her fingers tracing the worn edges of an old letter inside. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant yet hurried. She had read it countless times before. But tonight, the words felt heavier. The letter spoke of family, of expectations, and of a legacy she had spent years trying to escape. It was a life she had left behind to carve out her own path. But it seemed that no matter how far she ran, the weight of that legacy followed her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Emma's laughter echoing down the hallway. Sophia closed the box, setting it aside as she walked to the playroom. There, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her small hands strumming the strings of a guitar. The soft melody was clumsy but full of effort, and Emma's face lit up with joy. I did it, Sophia, Emma exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. I made music. Sophia knelt beside her, her smile genuine. You did, Emma, and with practice, you'll get even better. But their moment was interrupted by Alexander's sharp voice from the doorway. What is going on here? Sophia stood quickly, smoothing her dress. Emma wanted to learn music, she explained. I thought it would be a positive outlet for her. Alexander's gaze darkened. And how exactly is music going to prepare her for the real world? She doesn't need distractions. She needs focus. But Daddy, I love it, Emma said, her voice trembling as she clutched the guitar. Alexander ignored her plea, his attention fixed on Sophia. I don't pay you to make decisions for my daughter, he said coldly. Stick to your responsibilities and leave her education to me. Sophia's frustration bubbled to the surface, but she kept her voice steady. With all due respect, Mr. Kane, fostering creativity isn't a distraction. It's a way for her to express herself. Alexander's lips thinned into a line. It doesn't pay the bills. Miss Carter. He turned to Emma, softening his tone slightly. You can play later. For now, finish your homework. Emma's face fell as she placed the guitar aside. Yes, Daddy, she murmured, her voice barely audible. As Alexander left the room, Sophia crouched down beside Emma, her voice gentle. Don't let this discourage you. You're talented, and no one can take that from you. But as she sat in the quiet that followed, Sophia couldn't shake the growing realization that her fight for Emma's happiness was a battle against forces far bigger than herself. And the question lingered in her mind. How long could she continue to stand her ground in a world so determined to silence her? The days following the incident with the guitar were tense. The Kane penthouse, already a cold and imposing place, felt even more stifling. Alexander Kane's words lingered in Sophia's mind, their sharpness cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. She couldn't understand how a man so powerful and intelligent could fail to see what his daughter truly needed. Emma wasn't a project to be managed. She was a little girl desperate for love, attention, and freedom to express herself. Sophia found herself more determined than ever to protect Emma's spark. She had come to love the child as if she were her own. But standing up to Alexander Kane was like going to war with a storm. You could feel the force building, but you never knew when or where it would strike. It was on a quiet Wednesday morning when Emma approached Sophia, her small face lit with excitement. Sophia, she whispered, as though sharing a secret, there's a recital at school today. They asked me to play a song on stage. I want to do it, but I'm scared. Do you think I can? Sophia crouched down to meet Emma's eyes, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Of course you can, she said softly. You've been practicing so much. And you've got a gift. Emma, don't let fear stop you from showing it to the world. Emma smiled, her fears momentarily forgotten. But as she grabbed her backpack, Alexander's figure appeared in the doorway. He was dressed impeccably as always, his phone in one hand, his sharp gaze fixed on the two of them. "What's this about a recital?" he asked, his tone more inquisitive than accusatory for now. Sophia hesitated, unsure how to phrase it without drawing his immediate disapproval. "Emma has a chance to play music at school today," she explained, keeping her voice neutral. "It's an opportunity for her to showcase what she's been working on." Alexander's brow furrowed. "Absolutely not," he said curtly, setting his phone down. "She's been falling behind in math, and music is a waste of time. Focus should be on academics." "But Daddy," Emma began, her voice trembling. "I really want to—" "No," Alexander interrupted, his tone final. "You can't afford distractions right now." "Emma." Sophia clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to remain calm. She stepped forward, her voice firm but measured. "Mr. Kane, with respect, this isn't just about playing a song. It's about building confidence and allowing her to express herself. That's as important as her academics." Alexander's gaze snapped to her, sharp and unyielding. "You seem to forget your place. Miss Carter, my daughter's future is not for you to dictate." Sophia met his eyes, refusing to back down. "And I think you forget that Emma is a child, not a checklist. She needs balance in her life, both structure and creativity." The room fell silent, the tension crackling like static electricity. Emma stood frozen, glancing between the two adults, her expression a mix of fear and hope. For a moment, it seemed as though Alexander might relent, but his jaw tightened, and he turned away. "She's not going to that recital," he said coldly, picking up his phone. End of discussion. Sophia's heart sank as Emma's shoulders slumped in defeat. The little girl trudged off to her room, her spark dimmed, but Sophia wasn't ready to let it end there. Later that morning, as Alexander left for his office, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't stand by and watch Emma lose the joy she had found in music. Quietly, she packed Emma's guitar into its case and slipped into her room. "Emma," she said softly, sitting beside her on the bed, "I know your dad said no, but this is your moment. If you want to perform, I'll take you." Emma's eyes widened with surprise. "But what if Daddy finds out?" Sophia smiled gently. "Let me worry about that. Sometimes doing what's right means taking a risk." The little girl hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Okay, let's do it." The school auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents and students filled the seats. Sophia sat near the back, her heart pounding as she watched Emma walk nervously onto the stage. The spotlight seemed far too big for her small frame, but when she adjusted the guitar strap and began to play, the music silenced the room. At first, the notes were shaky, but as Emma found her rhythm, her confidence grew. By the time she finished, the applause was deafening. Sophia clapped the loudest, her chest swelling with pride. Emma beamed, her cheeks flushed with happiness. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. But as they returned to the penthouse that evening, the weight of reality crashed down. Alexander was waiting in the living room, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding. "Where have you two been?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Sophia stepped forward, shielding Emma instinctively. "Emma performed at her recital," she said plainly. "She did beautifully." Alexander's eyes darkened. "I told you she wasn't a go." "Mr. Kane," Sophia replied, her voice steady. "This wasn't about disobedience. It was about giving Emma a chance to shine, to feel proud of herself." "That's not your decision to make," Alexander snapped, his voice rising. "You are here to follow my instructions, not to undermine me." Emma, sensing the rising tension, clung to Sophia's side. "Daddy, please don't be mad at her. It was my idea." But Alexander's focus was locked on Sophia. "Pack your things," he said coldly. "You're no longer needed here." The words hit Sophia like a blow, but she kept her composure. Kneeling down, she handed Emma a small silver locket. "Remember what I told you," she whispered. "You're stronger than you think." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she clutched the locket. "Don't go, Sophia, please." But there was no reasoning with Alexander now. Sophia gathered her belongings in silence, her heart breaking with every step she took away from Emma. As the door clicked shut behind her, the weight of everything came crashing down. The taxi ride back to her modest apartment felt endless. Sophia stared out the window at the twinkling city lights, her mind replaying the events of the day. She had done what she thought was right, but at what cost? Losing Emma felt like losing a piece of herself. When she arrived home, the small, empty space felt colder than usual. She sat on the edge of her bed, opening the wooden box that contained the letter she had clung to all these years. Its contents were a reminder of the life she had tried to escape, a legacy tied to power and privilege, one that had shaped her but never defined her. As she traced the familiar handwriting, a knock at the door startled her. She stood, her heart racing. When she opened it, a man in a tailored suit stood before her, his expression stoic. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's time. You've been summoned." Sophia froze, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent years running from her family's expectations. But now, it seemed, they had caught up to her. "I told you before," she said, her voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through her. "I want no part of it." The man's gaze didn't waver. "Things have changed. If you don't step in, someone else will, and they won't be as kind." Sophia closed the door, leaning against it as she tried to catch her breath. The past she had tried so hard to leave behind was now demanding her attention. And in the back of her mind, she couldn't help but think of Emma, of the promise she had made to protect the little girl's light. Sophia knew she had a choice to make. She could continue running, or she could face the legacy that had shaped her life and use it to fight for what mattered most. The morning light seeped through the cracks in Sophia's modest apartment blinds, but it brought no comfort. She sat by the window, her thoughts racing as she stared out at the bustling Chicago streets below. The man's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "It's time. You've been summoned." For years, she had run from the Carter legacy, a family name tied to immense power, influence, and a wealth she had rejected long ago. She wanted no part of the corruption that had consumed her family's empire. But now, it seemed, fate was pulling her back. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, snapping her from her thoughts. She picked it up hesitantly, her heart sinking when she saw the message. "Emma is asking for you. She won't stop crying. We need to talk." The message was from Alexander Kane, for a man who rarely admitted weakness. The words felt almost desperate. Sophia closed her eyes, the image of Emma's tear-streaked face flashing in her mind. She couldn't leave the girl like this, not when she had already lost so much. But to return to the penthouse would mean facing Alexander, and everything unresolved between them. And so, with her decision made, Sophia grabbed her coat and stepped out into the crisp Chicago air, her mind set on what needed to be done. The penthouse felt just as cold and unwelcoming as it had the day she left. Alexander was waiting in the living room, standing by the grand window that overlooked the city. His silhouette was framed by the light of the morning sun, but there was a tension in his posture that Sophia hadn't seen before. "You came," he said, his voice low. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Emma won't talk to anyone. She's locked herself in her room, and nothing I say seems to make a difference." Sophia nodded, her own emotions carefully guarded. "Where is she?" Alexander gestured toward the hallway, and Sophia made her way to Emma's room. She knocked gently on the door. "Emma? It's me." There was a pause before a small, trembling voice replied. "Sophia? Yes. Sweetheart, I'm here." The door creaked open just enough for Emma to peer out, her tear-streaked face breaking Sophia's heart. Without a word, the little girl threw her arms around Sophia, holding on tightly as if afraid she might disappear again. "I thought you left forever," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Sophia knelt down to Emma's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll always be here for you, Emma, no matter what." Emma's grip tightened, but the sound of Alexander clearing his throat behind them broke the moment. Sophia stood, her protective instincts flaring as she faced him. "This can't keep happening," Alexander said, his tone laced with frustration. "You've made her dependent on you. It's not healthy." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "She's a child, Alexander. She needs stability, not the cold, distant approach you've been giving her." "And what would you know about raising a child?" he snapped. But there was less venom in his voice this time, as if the weight of the situation was finally sinking in. Sophia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I know enough to see that she's hurting, and I know that if you don't let her feel loved, truly loved, you'll lose her." Alexander's expression softened just slightly, the cracks in his armor beginning to show. "I've always done what I thought was best for her. I didn't want her to grow up weak or unprepared." "Strength doesn't come from discipline alone," Sophia countered. "It comes from love, from knowing someone is there for you no matter what." For a moment, Alexander seemed to consider her words. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Stay," he said quietly. "At least for now. For Emma." The days that followed were unlike anything Sophia had experienced in the Kane household before. Alexander, though still reserved, began making an effort to connect with Emma. He asked her about her music, sat with her during meals, and even joined her for a few moments in the playroom. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a start. Sophia watched from the sidelines, a mix of relief and caution in her heart. She knew that progress was fragile, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her own past was still lurking, waiting to resurface. Her fears were confirmed one evening when she returned to her apartment to find another letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Edward Sloan, the man who had taken control of the Carter family's empire after Sophia walked away. The letter was short but menacing. "Your absence has cost us greatly. It's time to come back and reclaim your place, or I will ensure that you regret it." Sophia's hands trembled as she crumpled the letter. Edward had always been ruthless, using fear and manipulation to maintain his hold over the Carter legacy. But now, his reach was extending beyond her, and she wouldn't let him drag Emma or Alexander into his web. The final confrontation came sooner than Sophia expected. She was in the penthouse, helping Emma with a school project, when Alexander walked in with a grim expression. "We need to talk," he said, his voice serious. "I've been looking into your past." Sophia's heart sank. "What did you find?" Alexander handed her a folder, his gaze unreadable. "Edward Sloan, the Carter family, your connection to all of it. Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia swallowed hard, the weight of her secrets crashing down around her. "Because I wanted to leave it behind," she admitted. "I didn't want that world to define me. But now, it seems I don't have a choice." Alexander's expression softened slightly. "You don't have to face it alone. Whatever's coming, we'll handle it together." Sophia met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. The confrontation with Edward took place at the Carter estate, a sprawling mansion that felt more like a battlefield than a home. Sophia and Alexander arrived together, their united front a stark contrast to the cold manipulation that Edward represented. The boardroom was filled with powerful figures, all of them watching as Sophia stepped forward to confront Edward. She spoke with a calm authority, laying out the ways he had abused his power and betrayed the Carter name. With Alexander's help, she presented evidence that exposed Edward's corruption, leaving him with no choice but to step down. By the time the meeting ended, Sophia had reclaimed her place at the head of the Carter family legacy. But she knew this wasn't just a victory for herself. It was a victory for everyone who had been silenced by Edward's greed. Back in Chicago, the Kane penthouse felt different, warmer, lighter. Alexander had begun to rebuild his relationship with Emma, and Sophia had found a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as the three of them sat together in the living room, Emma picked up her guitar and began to play. The melody was soft and imperfect, but it filled the room with a sense of peace. "You're getting better every day," Sophia said, smiling at her. Emma grinned. "I had a good teacher." Alexander glanced at Sophia, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "We both did." As the music played on, Sophia allowed herself to relax. The battles they had fought, both within and outside the penthouse, were far from forgotten. But for the first time, she felt like they were moving forward, together. And for now, that was enough.